Now I'm gonna be honest, this script went through about 3 different rewrites and several different rough drafts, and I'm kind of very tired of talking about scary mice, so I'd appreciate it if you watched the whole thing and told me how you felt about it. Now on to the video. I'm a guy that appreciates and bathes in the glories of video game as a medium, and there's so many different ways to take the art form, innovating upon a genre or renovating old concepts for a new generation. Mighty companies and brands such as Nintendo with Mario, Mario and Mario, Bethesda with Skyrim, Skyrim and Skyrim, EA with... alright, you get the point. You can't always rely on these larger companies or even official IP holders to create the type of game that you want, either to fill your niche or to move away from a long overdone gameplay style. Sometimes you need to look towards fan creations. Works that are the vision of the fandom and how they want to represent these stories. And while they've been criticized to hell and back for invalid and valid reasons,
I want a diamond ring, I want some bracelets and everything. Daddy, you better get the best for me.
these are not representative of most fandoms, which is why I don't really like the notion of all fandoms are bad. Games like Friday Night Funkin' thrive off of purely community-run content that keeps the game alive to this day, or games like Roblox or Minecraft with minigames and maps all created by the community. You won't find too many people looking back on old official Minecraft maps. That's all I'm gonna say there. FNAF is in a very similar situation, though with a lot more balance. Neither side carried the other, and each required each other to survive. Just as an example, even if the wait for FFPS was only about 8 months, there being little to no official content did not get replaced by the fan game content. Part of that could be argued for fan games not being too great around that time, which I definitely agree with.
True, and yeah, that's pretty true.
Though that balance has greatly shifted over the years, to where fan game content and fan content in general has become greater than the official material.
Oh wow. Freddy, you alright there, pal?
That change is what I want to cover. This is going to be a series of videos dedicated to going over my encounters with various modern fan games and fan creations and giving my unfiltered thoughts on it. I'll still be respectful, of course, but I won't be experiencing them without some level of a critical eye. But you know it wouldn't be my videos without any quirky memes interjected, so let's get started. This game here is Five Nights at Chuck E. Cheese Rebooted, and while I don't really identify as a gal, seeing this footage of the game did get me a little bit wet. The visuals, designs, atmosphere, and simplicity is what immediately stood out to me. Nothing about it seemed like a rip-off FNAF game or explicitly based on a later entry. It focuses on being a scary sit-and-survive horror game. To say I had high expectations would be putting it lightly. I was f***ing hyped as hell to shit this out. To play this shit of this out. Shut up. If you've been in the community as long as me and appreciate the older tone of the FNAF games, then you're probably in the same boat as me, craving for anything to fill in that void that mainline couldn't. So, when I hopped on in and played it, I grew to have some admittedly mixed feelings. To start off, the game's visuals and presentation is easily the best part about the game. I was immediately put back by The Office and having all the animatronics right in front of you. It felt a bit weird initially, but after watching a developer interview, apparently a big reason for this was because traditional security office logically wouldn't exist at this time.
Yeah, so like back then, the locations were extremely small. You know, they didn't have this stuff back then. Like, there wasn't animatronic pizzerias, so like they obviously didn't plan that kind of thing. It always made sense to me that there wouldn't be an office, a proper office.
So they carefully made each of these locations as realistic as possible, and it really does show. The setting is very believable and immersive. Seeing all these old arcade games that aren't the generic copy and paste ones that even mainline had fallen into really helped with the believability. Of course, they wouldn't have purely modern arcade machines. This is the late 70s. Video games were a very new concept at the time, let alone arcade games. The camera UI isn't at all typical for a FNAF game either. Rather, it uses a realistic channel system with no map, since cameras at the time didn't have those. You don't pull up a tablet, you look at your crappy CRT television. The camera isn't in a faded full color, it's entirely black and white and very grainy. See, Steelwool? That's how you make crappy cameras. You don't just have low poly models. But anyways, the animatronics and their designs are heavily inspired by the actual 70s animatronics, who were all portrait based. Now, for all those fans that have a very low attention span and didn't know that the 70s and 80s did not have advanced child kidnapping robots that could waddle around a facility, these were essentially animatronics that had no legs and functioned entirely within these portrait frames. These were actually really cool, and it's awesome to see them be utilized here. It makes both the actual human size threat, which I'll get to later, and the crawlies on the ground even creepier when juxtaposed. It feels like they really shouldn't be moving around, and it brings back that haunted feeling that FNAF games, both official and fan-made, have been sorely missing. The level of detail here is greatly appreciated, and immersed me into the world that they set up here, though with some suspension of disbelief in regards to your employer calling you up and being unaware of the robots being aggro. I thought that was a bit weird, though thankfully at the end he knows to get the hell out of there the moment he realizes this is the case. He even comes into question why they're so angry and why you've decided to stay despite knowing the danger. More on that later. Though it really does seem like I'm missing something in all of this, you know, something really crucial to a game, you know, that I am playing. You know, I feel like
Get on with it. Yes, get on with it.
Enough of the cock torturing, I'll get to the gameplay already. Now, I've spent a bit of time talking about the things that I find amazing about this game. The research and love that was put into every single frame of this game, creating a truly scary experience for whomever is put into the scenario. And while that still remains true, the execution of the gameplay is easily the least polished and thought out part of the game. To give you a bit of food analogy, because I love me some food. The gameplay is like if you were given a recipe for a delicious pie. You have all the ingredients for it placed explicitly right in front of you.
Ooh, look at this though. That's tasty.
You do the first step of cutting the apples, and then step 2 has jack shit.
Gone. Reduced to atoms.
And there's no further explanation. So you just have to fumble around figuring out how to make this pie. And after 16 different burnt and absolutely atrocious attempts, you decide to look this shit up. The first night is straightforward, and I had very little confusion, and that goes with the second night as well. I even had some notes that were purely praising the game up to this point. But the moment night 3 hit, my god, I was given no explanation for how the hell I'm supposed to beat this purple guy bootleg Easter egg mother. I eventually caved in and just looked it up after several deaths to this fucking loser. I did the same for Helen, who for some reason is the most obscured and impossible to notice animatronic. Why are you just there in the corner? You're not some goddamn chameleon, you're not SBO.
Beware my ninja power.
But I didn't have any of this happen for the final character of the main campaign. So I bet you're wondering, who is the final character in Five Nights at Chuck E. Cheese? Who is this grand final villain that I have to face off against in the final night of the game? You fight a fat Italian and the game ends.
男は死に場所を探していた.
And Fight is honestly giving this gallons more credit than it deserves. I didn't even realize what his mechanic was because I constantly accidentally kick him out and avoid death, flailing around in the corner like he did something. Like, who are you? You're the least threatening animatronic by far. And the finale? You know, the ending to the story, dog shit.
Know your fucking place, trash.
I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There was no 6th night, nor is there a canon continuation. Only a custom night that adds 4 new characters that I didn't bother to complete. And before you tell me in the comments, I'm entirely aware that there's a true ending to this game if you complete the hardest mode in the custom night. But honestly, no. I'm not going to grind to complete a 12-minute long night that'll just rip my asshole apart bleeding out, purely for the sake of getting any semblance of an ending. From here on though, I'm going to be discussing the new content added through the custom night, including the true ending, so skip to this timestamp if you care about spoilers. We good? Alright, so it seems to be revealed that you're the killer in all of this, as evident by the mirror inside of the costume's mask. And it's a pretty cool reveal overall, but not worth going through all that trouble personally, which is why I ended up just looking it up on YouTube. But I'm gonna be real, the sheer depression that I felt realizing that there were 4 extra characters exclusive to the custom night that were all really cool. Oh man, that was painful. Billy Bob, Hippo Lady, Modern Chuck, and Mike Victim were all characters that I actually really liked. They had great mechanics, For the most part, as much as it pains me to say, knowing that Billy Bob will go completely unused in this game, it does make sense from a timeline perspective. Still gonna cry about it though. But to go back to the gameplay, when I actually know what the mechanics I'm dealing with are, the game's actually pretty fun. One standout moment was when the costume got to the door and he just kind of stood there.
Hi, how are you?
When I turned on my flashlight, I instinctively closed the door on him. But he just pulled it right back up. I was genuinely terrified because I could hear Chuck laughing in the background. The costume in general is one of my favorite antagonists in FNAF media, period. He is genuinely horrifying to see come closer and closer through the cameras, and he has that kind of Foxy-esque mechanic that isn't directly explained, but you learn naturally as you play. And hearing the explanation for why they think the items are knocked over felt like a real setup to a horror story that you would tell at a campfire. If there's anyone that I feel like they completely nailed, it's definitely him. Jasper is just kind of there though. He's a bit funny if anything, and he stops being scary after the first 2 nights. Chuck still retains his creepiness though. Being the only animatronic that can speak, hearing the audio cue for his appearance is startling for a while, especially when Jasper is added on top of that. The other 2 animatronics, aside from that lump of pizzas, are still incredibly creepy, and even if I did dog on Helen earlier, her being obscured does give her a dub in the scary department, and it does make a lot of sense because you'd want to hide when you're trying to attack someone, and it's very unnerving to look at. And Munch's mechanic is also pretty cool. You gotta be really quick about it. And that goes for most of the animatronics too, other than Chuck and Jasper, who just kind of stand there. If you don't react in time, it's a bit weird. I didn't really mention the storage segments much because, in my opinion, they're the weakest part of the game. It has a lot of tense and creepy shots, and it's a decently cool idea, but executed very poorly, and I found myself fumbling and mumbling to myself. So, what did I think of the game? Well, you watched this video, so I'm sure you figured it out, but in case you haven't, and you just skipped to the end of the video to figure out my opinion, I felt that the gameplay was poorly explained and ended off anticlimactically, with you being required to play the hardest mode of the game to get any semblance of a real ending. Though it played well enough and was still pretty tense throughout. On the other hand, everything else about the game, the presentation, the art, the music especially, that title screen music, top tier. Whoever the composer is, props to you. And the concept of the game is also executed beautifully. I'm never taken out of this world at any point. And anytime that I find myself irritated by terrible game flow, I get reminded that the foundation is just beautifully built. On the old Ecto approved tier list, I put this game on Persona 5 tier. This game has a lot of style, but fumbles on the substance too much for me to not give it a lower ranking. I still think this game is very good, and I do think you should definitely check it out, just to give yourself your own opinion on it. Because I do think that there's a lot of great things about this game, and this team is very talented, and nothing about the game really told me otherwise. That's all for today. If you like this video, just click that beautiful like button, avoid the dislike button, and leave a comment down below what you felt about the game. And if you haven't played the game, why don't you tell me what game I should play or what kind of FNAF media I should take a look at. I do read all the comments as much as I stopped replying to them recently because, oh my god, there's way too many to reply to, but I do read them. Thanks for everything. I'll see you guys on the flip side, and take care.